films, but to Nancy's friend, the female.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think he probably kind of did that with Joanne too, but I really do think Truman was just social.
Right.
Wasn't, wasn't making a living. Yeah, but I mean, to be a writer, I think he had somewhat inquisitive and want to get down to people's needs.
And that's the other part of it. I think writers, and maybe more strongly, the better they are, the more skilled they are. And I think Truman was very skilled. Have a keen interest in people and don't mind laying themselves open if it leads to a reciprocal openness,
Yeah.
Like the more you lay yourself open to somebody, the more willing they are to do the same. And writers are very passionate about understanding new people and finding out what their experience is and so on. Now, all that said, what you said, Aaron, reminded me of the fact that I do think Truman, a lot of his writing, including In Cold Blood, has not a fatal flaw, but a minor flaw of being a little too sentimental at the last moment.
But he was very sentimental. I mean, he did boxes, Joanne showed me.
Right. I think the Christmas Story gets a little sickly sweet at the end. And I don't think he needed to invent the scene between Susan and Dewey at the end of In Cold Blood at the graveside. And every time I read that, it hits me like, it doesn't strike me as real as the rest of the book is.
Maybe his editor made him put it in.
It's possible. We can put your editors under the bus. I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, he's sentimental. I mean,
Okay, Craig, you weren't buying the. Can I put you on the spot? You weren't buying the Truman in Love with Terry bit.
No, I don't buy. I mean, I understand, but I can see how it can be misinterpreted because a kiss is it can cross that line, whereas a hug or I mean an affectionate hug, a supportive hug. I don't know.
we don't know.
Yeah.
Right. A bro hug is way different than
Right.
Yeah.
But I didn't get that sense from reading In Cold Blood either.
Perry may have misinterpreted because he knew Truman was gay, I'm sure. Right? So maybe he was just kind of, and if you read it, I believe he is pretty hypersensitive to people being gay, and he's like a man, I'm a straight man, and he's pretty clear about his sexuality in his book.
But that's
like you don't have too much.
Capote saying he says.
Right, that's true, But you wouldn't have known that if you were about it.
I don't know.
It took a long time to write this book, and then can you imagine knowing how am I going to end this book? Is this person going to live or is this person going to die?
Right. That's a big part of my book is the final act is about him feeling guilty that his book can't happen until these men are dead, and he cares about these men. So it's a painful process.
Right. Yeah.
Do you think he went into it expecting not to care about the men?
I don't think he would.
I don't know. I was going to ask earlier, do you guys have, on your copy of my book, is there the quote on the back from Truman about driving through?
Yeah.
Read it, Aaron.
Yeah, if I had known what waited for me in Garden City, I would have driven right through. I would never have stopped.
Right. And that's a real quote. And you have to remember, when he went into this process, he thought he was going to write a magazine article about what a town goes through when people who are part of the community are murdered like that. And like he told Alvin Dewey, he didn't even care if the people who did it were actually caught. He just wanted to write about that phenomenon, of what it's like when a community loses somebody, especially a close-knit community like that.
In a violent nature.
Right. I mean, he could never have foreseen that it would take 6 years of his life and create the emotional involvement that it did, I think.
And it really wasn't about the community, it was about the killers and the killers.
Right.
In the end.
Yeah, that's what it became.
Yeah.
And that's why
being a much different thing than he thought it was, and it ended up taking, I think, a lot more out of him than he thought it would.
Okay. Is that why you didn't write anything else after this?
Oh, he did, but what was the name of the book he was writing?
I didn't quite hear that. Did you ask if he ever wrote anything after?
Yeah, what was the name of the book that he was working on that caused all the drama in New York?
Yeah, where he was telling the stories of all his friends, and now that you asked me, I can't remember. But yeah, he was writing a tell-all book, and he loved to go on talk shows and tell scandalous stories about his friends and so on. And that they were not interested in him telling such things. They were
The alien Dave and the whole group.
right.
But I can't remember. And some people say he didn't write it. I mean, I think there was a part of it was published. I remember when that came out. Just like
There were an excerpt published somewhere. I don't remember what magazine. Yeah, but there was a big chunk of it published, which alienated most of his friends that he hadn't already alienated.
Yeah, and he did have addiction issues. I mean, yes.
He did. When I write a book like this, I have one theme in mind, and I try to keep that theme in mind through every scene as I work on it. And the theme of this book was that great art can cost a lot to the artist.
Yeah.
The premise being that Truman didn't anticipate how emotionally taxing this book would be. And I think he made a great work of art, but I think it took a lot from him. And I think he was not willing to get emotionally attached to a work of art again after this. And that, combined with his addiction issues and so on, kind of led him to spiraling out of a creative place in his life.
So how do artists, because I hear that story so often, right? Great artists, struggle with addictions, they struggle with kind of, I don't know. But so how do you get great art and manage to stay sane?
I don't know. I talked to my wife about this recently, where she has some heroes who are completely heroic, who have great work ethics and.
Oh, answered prayers. Excuse me for interrupting.
Yes. No, good. Thank you.
Answered prayers. Go ahead.
My wife has heroes like Goethe or even Gregory Peck. We were talking about actors the other night, who just appear to be wonderful people and work hard and so on. And all my heroes are the guys who are just self-destructive train wrecks. Truman and Orson Welles and James Thompson, one of my favorite writers.
Kurt Cobain.
Yes.
David Foster Wallace, ultimately.
Yeah.
There's got to be something about art that makes it hard to deal with reality on some level.
Or makes you a better artist if you can't do it. Which way is it? Is it chicken or the egg?
Both.
Yeah, it's tricky.
It's a chicken in an egg.
Well, most artists create their own reality.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot do.
Even
I think we just saw with Philip Seymour Hoffman, who we were talking about earlier. For me, my favorite artists are people who dig so deep into the truth of humanity that I just think it becomes painful. And I think it's much easier to be to make up fanciful stories that don't go really to the heart of what makes us tick.
Yeah.
But I think to really get to the heart of what is dark and glorious and so on about humans, I think that really takes a lot out of you. I don't think you can get to that place unless you're willing to dig deep into yourself, which I think is almost always painful.
Well, Philip Seymour Hoffman and The Master,
Right.
Dark movie. To do that, you got to become somebody who's really disturbing. You can Indiana Jones. I mean, you do it serious. You swing a whip, and you make a lot of money. But you got a guy like Hoffman who takes all these roles that are just so off, and it eventually has to take a toll.
Right.
Yeah.
And you wonder with good writers too.
Yeah, it's got to.
Well,
there's something about, say, I was thinking about, as you were talking there, Andy, I was thinking about the Hunger Games books and about how that's, I'm sure that somebody who's just starting to read, like read, is somebody who's young, is like, oh man, this is important. Oh, these are big ideas. But that's different than writing a story like In Cold Blood, in which you can't just, you're really looking at the darkest part of humanity and trying to make sense of it. I mean, that's what a narrative does. You're trying to piece these incoherent, just seemingly evil, random things into some sort of coherent whole so that it all kind of makes sense on some level. No, it doesn't.
It's so random. Guy
This
in
community center appears to have a bartender. What's going on here?
But you have a
She waved at me. She's been awesome.
Yeah, I'm very impressed.
Cold Blood, the one thing that got to me was Harry talking about Hickok being, such a man and virile and things like that. But then you've got Hickok going, calling him honey and sugar and things like that.
Oh,
That's
that's
interesting. And at first I thought, well, they were actually having an affair until they got into some of the other things. I brought that up.
I always
Seemed
wondered that.
strange.
Yeah.
Just knowing, not having read the book, but just knowing that I know the facts, I always figured that there was something like that.
going on.
Yeah, at least in Gary's head.
Well, Andre, what do you think about Hickok in that book? Because the way he portrays him is very different from the way he portrays Harry Smith.
Yeah, I think I found myself in the similar place Truman did. I didn't like Dick very much.
Yeah, but I wonder,
I understood him, but I think,
Harry had the more sympathetic story, obviously.
yeah, I think Perry's a more honest figure. Perry, I think, is capable of worse things, but I think they come from a more honest place, if that makes sense. I think Dick was just a surfacey bullshit artist.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. And he thought,
Sucked into something kind of through the psychoses that Harry possessed.
yeah.
Harry, he was hard. There were scenes with Dick where I wanted to write him really from his point of view. I mean, that's what you try to do. You try to write each scene from the character's point of view, no matter how despicable they may be. And you do that whether Harry is pulling the shotgun trigger or whether Dick is being a con man. And I actually, this is maybe not a good thing to say, I find it harder to write the scenes where Dick was being a bullshit artist than I did where Perry was doing horrific stuff.
Yeah. Maybe because we know Perry's history and Dick's history was not nearly as traumatic.
Right. Now, I don't think this is part of it, but it's worth noting that Dick's home is like 20 miles from where I live.
Oh my
No
God.
way.
So I do feel more connected to him, kind of in a way. I drive through the town where he lived with his father, like, on a weekly basis, in Edgerton, Kansas, which is not far from here.
Wow. Interesting.
And I often think, I drive that highway. I think about that drive a lot when they got in the car together near Edgerton, not far from where I live, and they drove out to Holcomb, and then they ended up driving back. And Perry spent a night in a cheap motel, like 10 miles from where I grew up in Olathe, Kansas. So it's hard it's hard to travel those roads and not think of them in some context or other.
Andy, is that what drove you to it, or attracted you to this, to write this novel, this graphic novel?
Yeah, it's a big part of it. I always say I'm probably lazy because my first two graphic novels, my first two big stories I made up on my own were historical fiction, and they were both set locally. My first book was about the Union Station Massacre, which happened in Kansas City. And my second one was this. And part of it is because I wanted to write about the people that I could relate to and that I knew. And part of it is because I like to go, I like to be part of the space. Which sounds, now that I say it, sounds hypocritical because I didn't go to Holcomb until after I wrote the book.
That's funny. But you did so much research. I mean, it's kind of like you had been there.
I did, and I mean, I read about this in the new afterword. It wasn't gonna be useful from a visual point of view, because Chris, the artist, had better reference by freezing the DVD frames. They filmed In Cold Blood in the actual place in 1966, so they were a lot more accurate than I could have been in 2005. But I'm very self-conscious about being another person going out there and saying, hey, did you meet Truman, or did you know the Clutters? It seems too obnoxious to me. I think those people have had enough of that.
What are you working on now?
I'm writing my first prose novel, which is also locally set. Another cop-out, but it's about Kansas City in the 40s. It's kind of fun.
You gotta stick with what works, man.
Now, in between, I did write a graphic novel about a South American kidnapping. So, and I've never been to that place, and I only know about it through research. So I did do one thing that was different.
So, okay, what do you like in? I'm totally stealing the floor. Sorry, you probably.
No, you're not.
Okay. What other? So we've only read Alison Bechdel's Fun Home and this as graphic novels. So what else do you like? What should we be reading?
Well, that's what I like and what you should read are maybe two different things.
No. We like weird and some.
My hero is a guy named Frank Miller who did a big book called The Dark Knight, and did a run on Daredevil, did a book called Ronin. I don't know if you heard of the movie 300, but he did the graphic novel, which that is kind of based on. Yeah. He's my favorite cartoonist. I'm also a big fan of Alan Moore's, and while I love Watchmen, which gets a lot of hype, I prefer From Hell, which is his Jack the Ripper book.
Oh, wow, that sounds okay. I'm not reading that one, but I will support. I'm reading it.
And while I would recommend it, it's incredibly dense, and I mean, it's a tough read. It's full of appendices, and it's kind of a slog to get through it.
It can't be worse than.
As long as there's no numerals in the top.
Yeah, there's no numbers, right? What's the
2666. I told you about this thing. Yeah.
Oh,
I will never live this down. I will die saying I love that book.
She has to say that because she.
Because I forced it on you. Right, yeah. It was awesome. You liked it by the end, though.
I'm also a big fan of David Mazzucchelli, who has a few graphic novels out, and now I'm blanking on his last one, which I really love. But if you look, there aren't too many guys named David Mazzucchelli, so if you search him, I like his stuff a lot.
Yeah, my wife bought me the Walking Dead complete series for Christmas. That was good. That's really good.
Oh.
Yeah.
Get the first stuff, the first, 4 or 8 or 10 or whatever?
It's the whole thing. It was like it's really thick. It's a giant, giant novel. Yeah, they released it for, around Christmas time. Yeah,
I read that book to a point, and I know all the creators involved. I'm pretty close with a couple of them. And I watched the show to a point, and then at some point I said, this is not good for me.
Yeah, it came from graphic novel. That's really good.
So there's this underground of graphic novelists out there?
And they all hang out and they
I mean, I had no idea that existed, really, truly, until that other book. Yeah.
Right.
I have to say this was my very first graphic novel, and when I realized it was a graphic novel, I was like, oh no, because I had zero interest, but I loved it. I literally couldn't put it down.
I liked it because it took me a couple hours to get through it. I was thinking, I'm never going to get to go to book club this week, and then I'm like, oh wait, I did do this. I forgot we were reading. I just busted through it. I was like,
he's a voracious reader. He reads 5 books a day, so.
Right. Well, you saying it was your first graphic novel and that you really enjoyed it means a lot to me.
Yay!
It really does. I try to talk to, I love talking to nice people like you. I try to talk to groups of librarians whenever I can, because, and this was especially true about a decade ago, a lot of librarians have not read graphic novels, and they just think they're always going to be guys in tights punching each other. And-
Which is okay.
Cool, yeah. Why would
Right.
you do that?
I have a PowerPoint presentation where I break down a scene. It's the scene in the rain where Truman has just run out instead of watching Perry be executed, and Nancy appears to him for the last time. And I show the script, and then I show the art and how they work together, and I talk about what my goals are in that scene. And when I start talking about things like theme and symbolism and all this stuff that we're trying to achieve, these librarians are like, "Oh, I didn't know that graphic novels even thought about such things."
Well, that's why I loved your little appendix part that showed what went into each page, because
Right.
you don't even think about the fact that each little detail is thought out before. And I just think, you're just writing a bunch of stuff. You start, it takes you a little while and you're done.
Right.
Wait a minute, this is a really big process. Yeah.
And comics have unique strengths. Mainly, in a graphic novel, we can control the way you move through the story. If we do our job well, we can make you move through a page very rapidly, or we can slow you down and make you kind of ponder each moment. And that's unique, along with the fact that, does anybody have a copy of my book there?
Yes. Oh, many.
Okay. If this isn't too tedious, do you mind going? Are your pages numbered?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, there.
So could you go to page 116?
Right here? Yeah?
No, they're different.
Damn.
So go a little earlier. What I'm looking for is Truman has fallen in the mud, and then Nancy appears at the bottom of the page.
Oh, yeah,
Just
that's,
there, yeah.
yeah.
Okay,
Okay,
110.
before he sees her when he's falling in the mud.
Yes, right there. That's the one.
118 is he's out there, he looks like he's going to throw up, he's got weak, and he's running through
Right.
it, falls in the mud, and then it says, "Hello, Truman."
So that moment at the bottom of the page shows off what I think are unique about comics. There are these 4 horizontal panels at the bottom, in the bottom 2/3 of that page or so.
Yes. Yes.
Nancy appears only in that last panel, right?
Yes, her legs, just her legs.
Right. The magic of comics is that I don't dictate how she appeared.
Right.
You get to make that happen.
Yeah.
If this were a film or even a novel, I would have to describe that experience for you. She would either flash in instantly, or she would gradually fade in, or there would be some kind of effect.
Yeah.
But because in one panel here she's there, and because we've set up this sense of timing, which is kind of static because Truman isn't moving because he's isolated in the middle of that panel. When Nancy appears, you have to make a decision about what that looked like to Truman.
Yeah.
So you get to bring something to the experience that is kind of unique to this art form, I think.
Yeah. You can see his facial gestures change just ever so slightly.
Right.
So you see something building there, but all of a sudden, boom. Yeah.
In the script, I said to Chris, and he drew it really well. In the panel before she shows up, I said that Truman should look up, although he doesn't even know why.
Oh.
Oh, okay.
So there should be a sense of him like anticipating that something is coming, but he doesn't know what it might be.
Yeah.
And then she shows up.
Yeah, I remember when I got to that panel thinking, and then I saw the legs, I thought for a second, oh wait, is that Agent Dewey chasing after him?
Right.
Yeah. So he would have heard
I
that.
love the top panel of the next page, which Chris drew really beautifully, and which has a lot of subtle things going on. Like the fact that he's been centered in those previous panels. He occupies the center of the panel and he looks very isolated. When Nancy shows up, she kind of forces him down to a corner of the panel, to a corner of the composition.
Yeah.
And he's in a very dark place, and she's coming from a place where the light is coming from that other corner of the panel.
I love that light effect that he.
Right.
That's great.
I said something to Chris, I don't have it in front of me, but I said something like, if possible, Truman should be in a place of darkness here, and Nancy is coming from more of a place of light. And he drew that really well, I think.
He's so calm, and he's so
Yeah.
distraught.
Yeah.
Right. And I again, in the new edition, there's some supplemental material, and I talk about writing Nancy, and what scared me most was I didn't want any member of her family to hear about this book and be upset. I didn't want to treat her with any disrespect.
Yeah.
Well, I can get that.
Because she doesn't deserve it. You know, she's an innocent person, and I wanted to represent her, but do so in a very thoughtful way. And my first decision was that if she's going to be in the book, she has to be in a place where she's beyond anger. Because if she's angry, that's all she's going to be through the book, is pissed off that she and her family have been murdered.
Right.
And I didn't want to portray that. To me, that wasn't important. I wanted her to get to another place and kind of in a way indicate that she now belongs to a place where anger isn't as important.
Right. And she was young and innocent, and yeah, you wouldn't expect her, if she was murdered, to be pissed off. She's in this better place, apparently. Why would she be angry?
Right. I hope so, yeah.
Yeah, that's what you hope. I mean, that's what you go through life.
Right.
Yeah.
And it came across, right?
Yeah.
And I remember in the book, and it's not a spoiler, but their home life was not perfect.
Right. And I only touched on that briefly. Like, I have Nancy mention that her mother cried a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
But
And Truman touches on this quite a bit in his book, and I touch on it briefly. I think Mother was probably either a manic depressive or just a depressive who.
Very depressed.
Yeah, right. And they, in 1959, they didn't, in the middle of Kansas especially, they didn't deal with such things very well.
She would just lay down with the
Right. You went up to your room to relax, and you told the visitors that she was having a headache or whatever. You didn't talk about such things out in public.
Spell.
Is that what you people think about Kansas?
Yeah, that's what we think about
Kansas.
Kansas.
Kansas is hopeless. Been rough up.
Maybe we should hear her.
Yeah.
It really sounds more like that the mother was repressed, because they were talking about, when she was off in another city and she had a job and she had all these other things. Yeah, it sounded like she was really alive at that point. So I think she found her home life.
She's a teacher, wasn't she a teacher? She's a teacher.
Yeah, that I don't remember.
It's been a long time.
Yeah. I don't know. I will say, I talked earlier about how I did some research for this book, but the one thing I didn't do was reread In Cold Blood. And the reason I didn't is that I was really scared of telling Truman's story a second time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Which seemed really pointless to me. Like, there was no point in rewriting In Cold Blood.
No, yeah.
Right.
So I asked a friend of mine to read it and give me facts on Nancy and other pertinent facts that I might need. But I didn't read In Cold Blood right before I started this book.
So you hadn't read it since you were a kid?
No, I read it once in junior high, and then I read it again, I don't know, probably 10, 15 years later. So I'd read it a couple times.
Okay.
Craig, you were going to say something about the son.
Yeah, I thought he was repressed in a way too.
Yeah, I did too. Nancy probably.
Yeah, Nancy was the outgoing,
Yeah.
success.
Yeah. You were like her dad, and Kenny was like mom.
So is that why Truman identifies more with Nancy than
Probably.
because that's sort of description?
I don't know. Maybe he's the author.
Yeah.
Well,
What he thinks.
Remember? And then Nancy?
Yeah, why would Truman identify more as Nancy than Kenya?
I think if I remember my thought process, she seemed like the person in the family who would be young and open, but intellectual enough to
Come back.
somehow express her experience better to Truman. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, she was old, right?
And she seemed like
Opinion.
like Capote, she seemed to be reaching out to others to gain their not their sympathy, but to realize something in their life that she can become a part of.
Right.
Yeah, she liked
Yeah.
she was baking pies or knitting or practicing.
Right.
It's like a really
Yeah.
Nice, yeah. What you would expect from Kenya is just nice,
I
wholesome.
think it's what Capote would want others to think of him too. I'm just doing my job, putting myself out there, and let's make something happen.
I'm a nice
Right.
person.
Yeah, and I am a nice person. Yeah.
And part of choosing Nancy, obviously there were selfish considerations like who I thought I wanted to write the most. But part of it was who might actually appear as a spirit to Truman. But because I tried to write her so that you can read the book, either she is a spirit or she's just a part of Truman's process. That I tried to think, well, if she is just part of Truman's process, who would Truman use out of the family to help get him through this? And for some reason, she spoke to me as somebody he would relate to.
Yeah. So,
I love it. You all settling up is fascinating. This is.
well, they close at, we got about 15 more minutes before the joint closes here, so we haven't drunk nearly as we normally do. We've been fascinated, we've been talking.
Yeah.
Really nice.
It's just so nice to really meet you.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't. It's such a pleasure to talk to people who read my book and enjoyed it, and be able to revisit something that's been out of my thoughts for a while. It's really a pleasure. So it's
Can't wait.
numbers all mine.
Yeah, let us know about the novel, as it comes together and all that. We'll be, we'll be the first ones to read it for sure.
Great. Will do.
Oh, Craig wants a title.
I'm not telling anybody the title yet. Of the novel. Now there is the graphic novel that is already done. Like I finished writing it 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It just got announced by my publisher. It's coming out in December, and it's called Ciudad.
Oh, cool! Congratulations. What's
Okay.
going on with it?
That's the one about South America?
Yeah, right. It's a South American kidnapping. It's pretty grim and violent. Yeah, it's good. It'll be out. Like I said, I've been done with it for 5 years. So again, it feels like something that's so distant from me now. It'll be interesting to see it in print.
Oh my gosh.
I really enjoyed your work. You did a great job.
Yeah.
You did really
Here.
Thank you.
Yeah. In some ways, I enjoyed Alison Bechdel's. I mean, it was the level of nuance and everything.
So how long ago did you guys read that?
Oh gosh, that was just a couple. That was about three or 4 months ago. This
Yeah, I
is
didn't read that.
late fall.
Okay.
It was my crazy.
Oh, that was my very first graphic novel. So
Yeah.
yeah,
It's amazing. I like that book a lot.
Yeah.
Passed it on.
Yeah, but this one was, there was just something about, I think, we're all pretty agreed about this one. Alison Bechdel, we were finding.
Your artist, Chris, just did such a great job of his lines.
Yeah.
The isolation of Capote. I think he felt very isolated during this time.
Right.
I think it shows, yeah.
Right. Chris was probably 25, I think, when he drew this thing.
Goodness.
Wow.
Yeah. When he drew he drew like the first, 4 pages or so as a sample, because he really hadn't done anything. And my publisher, when he saw the first few pages, like if you look at the first scene in New York, the first scene at the restaurant, there are lines there that Chris didn't draw because they didn't have to be there.
Yeah.
Like if you look at the waiter in the last panel, or the second to last panel, there's a few lines that he leaves out. Like the top of Jack's head in panel 3. It's a subtle thing, but it's pretty advanced to not draw things that don't absolutely have to be there because your brain fills in the details, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and the old-fashioned coffee pot.
Right. So my publisher was, when he did the samples, my publisher was like, well, we don't know, what do you think? And I said, if you look at page, you know, whatever this is, 4 or 5, the New York page, 25-year-olds are not supposed to know how to do this stuff.
Yeah.
So I think we better get this guy. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love how he's showing Truman smoking.
Yeah.
You know, because that is how he would smoke, very flamboyant.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
You just see the.
Well, you know what I liked that I noticed is the way over the 5 years after he left Kansas, how he drew Truman changing.
That's a good.
Because
Yeah.
Truman lost a lot of weight
Yeah.
during that time.
Yes.
Yeah, and
And
he
lines
really
in his
became,
face.
he did a really good job of showing that passage of time.
Right.
Look, I thought that was cool
I
too.
didn't think about it.
Yeah.
And I told him in the script that it was okay to exaggerate that a little bit. Really, in '66, Truman was still fairly thin and good-looking. But I said, if you want to cheat this up into like 1975 Truman, I don't have a problem with that. Yeah, we want to show that the process has taken a toll on him.
I
Right.
love the scene with Norman
Right.
Mailer and Babe, and
Right.
loved it because it was like reality. Really, that was his life in New York.
But it's a cartoon. That's not real.
Yes, it is.
Come on.
Picture book.
I didn't see Bugs Bunny in any of those
It's a
frames.
stupid picture book.
It's a stupid picture book.
Right.
Pearls and the jewelry on these women. He just did like a really, really amazing job.
Yeah. I loved writing that scene, getting to write Mailer and him interacting, and Truman being kind of bitchy and catty. You know, I love that stuff.
And he was so, Truman was so gay and Mailer was so
Not gay.
he got attracted to Truman.
Yeah.
You know, interesting, I thought, very interesting.
And Babe Paley supposedly really said that to him, like, do the easy one, dear. Don't follow around a bunch of maids. Go to Kansas. That'll be easier.
Yeah.
Right.
Good old Babe, who ended up breaking his heart,
Yeah.
really, the whole group. Really, really good.
So you're looking at your iPad. Are you looking at the Kindle app on your iPad?
Yeah, the Kindle app.
Okay.
IT Guide Word, my very first one that I've read on my iPad, my first book. And he told me like how I could like
Double tap
it, and that one, and then read over.
I didn't know whether to read it that way or not. I didn't know if that took away from it or not.
I kind of liked it, and then what I would do is kind of look at it first, and then I would
Yeah,
do each scene.
yeah.
Like you can like double click on it.
So each frame kind of pops up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I liked it, but I was wondering as I was doing that what you would think of it.
Yeah.
I personally like to see the whole page because the best artists design every panel, but they also design the page as a whole so that all the panels interrelate.
So that's what I thought too. I thought kind of like I'm cheating something here. It's kind of like why I hate iTunes. You know, people write albums, they don't write songs. And I like albums as a whole, and I hate people buying single songs. It pisses me off. I'm kind of passionate that way.
But sometimes I like people to kind of focus in on a particular
I know, I liked it, but I didn't want to like it. That's what I was
I
like,
kind of like being able to get really close in there and seeing Norman Mailer's curls.
yeah, it was kind of cool, but part of me thought I was doing something I shouldn't be doing.
That iPad is newer than an iPad 2, I assume?
Yes.
So it has a Retina screen. I had the first 3 iPads. I had the 1, 2, and then I've kept the 3 these years, how many years it's been. Because for me, the Retina screen made a big difference in being able to clearly see and read a whole comic book page at one time.
Yeah, it's really, like I said, I would like look at it and then I would just do it.
Right. The text especially looks really sharp, I think, on the Retina screen.
Yeah.
But for me, if you want to see the whole page, I'd like for you to experience the whole page all at one time. And then if you want to zoom in after you've seen the composition of the whole page,
Yes.
I think that's fine if you want to look at the detail a little more.
What I did, I would just like look at that whole page and then I would go back and look at the various, because there was so much detail. I mean,
There is.
happier. And he's got this great little hat that he would wear because that's how Truman was. Weird little hats. I mean, I love it.
Oh my gosh. Well, we can't thank you enough for taking the time to.
Yeah,
really.
So much.
Thanks, guys. Like I said, it was entirely my pleasure. I'm so glad you all read the book.
Definitely. We'll be watching
Yeah,
your new one.
exactly.
We'll speak to our librarians about moving graphic novels out of
Yes.
the corner.
Yeah.
Especially for
That's a big thing. Like a lot, traditionally, librarians, I mean, again, this is a little bit of an older mindset, but they would just shove them in the young adult, and if they weren't appropriate for young people, they didn't know what they were.
Right. You know what this is about.
That's right.
Right. So yeah, it's nice to see them get appreciated as a unique art form, which is, I mean, really, we should be proud. They're a very uniquely American art form, and they're capable of unique things.
Yes.
Amen.
I'll be buying this for my sons.
Great. Great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank
I don't
you
think I've
again.
ever read one, to my knowledge. So,
Have a great evening, and again, thanks so much. We had a great time.
oh, yeah.
Oh, thank you guys. You're a great group. And look, my drink is gone.
Now you're in the spirit. Now you're in the spirit.
Right home.
One of us.
Take care.
Take
We'll-
care, Andy.
Be well. Thanks so much, guys.